Welcome to a high energy class all about using high energy to serve God. So we are continuing Paragraph Zion, chapter 37, and we are discussing how the strategy, the technique to bringing redemption. And as the Alter Rebbe is laying it out, the strategy is we do good and we don't do bad. And as we do good, we draw godliness into this world. And as we refrain from the bad, we avoid any godliness being trapped by evil. That sounds so like mundane. That sounds like what we do all day. Yes, it is what we're supposed to be doing all day. And it's not mundane at all. It's actually the road to redemption. Every single good thing we do, every single commandment, every time we serve God in any way, we are drawing his energy into this world. What is redemption? When God is in this world. And every time we hold back from a transgression, we are weakening the grip of evil. We are lessening its power. We are removing from it its energies. And what is redemption? When there is no evil, we completely removed it. We completely de-energized it. And we brought God in. So the details of our life, we don't have to, start searching in the jungles of Africa. The details of our life are creating the redemption. So in this chapter, we said first, very innovative thought, though for us, of course, we've known it for 200 years, but very innovative thought of Tanya, we create redemption. What we are doing creates redemption. And the second point is, and it's what we're doing. No searching for some object that you have no clue where it is and how you're going to get it, but that's the key. It's right wherever you are. It's in serving God, doing what he wants, and abstaining from what he doesn't want. And step by step, as we discussed at length last week, we create redemption, which is a really empowering thought. It's like, wow, we are that powerful. The Alter Rebbe is saying, yeah, you're the ones bringing redemption. You are going to make it happen for this generation, for all times, and you are that powerful. You do have the ability. So let's read that inside. We are in, as we said, chapter 37. We are on page Mem Zion. We are 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines from the top of the page. The line begins with the word Ein Sof Baruch Hu. What we were saying was that every time we serve God, every time we do a commandment, we are changing the energy of the object being used. As we explained at length, the majority of this world is receiving its vitality from a filter called klipas noiga, a level of what we might loosely call evil. A klipa, we said, means a shell, a husk, a barrier. So anything that's a barrier to God is how we're defining evil. But it's a klipa that's noga. Noga means that there's a light shining through. So it's a level of non-godly that I can access that light. I can access the godly within it. How do I access that godly? By using this item directly to serve God, part of a commandment, or using it for the sake of God, using it to make all of my life a service of God. Meaning, if I have toothpaste is not godly. Toothpaste is not forbidden. So it's not coming from the realm we call Kedusha, straight godliness. No, toothpaste is not innately godly. And it's not coming from the level we call klipos tameos, those items that are forbidden. So what is it? Oh, it's klipos noiga. So what mitzvah do I do with toothpaste? You're not going to make a blessing on it. We don't make blessings in the bathroom. We're not eating it. It's not food. So what am I going to do with toothpaste? If you live your life for God, brushing your teeth is also part of serving God. Because to have healthy teeth, to have a beautiful white or clean at least smile, that's also part of serving God. You're supposed to smile at every person you meet. If your teeth are all grungy and yellow and full of food, well, that's not going to be really so appealing. It's not going to be such a welcoming smile. So if my life is for God, brushing my teeth is also for God. Doing my laundry is also for God. Taking a walk to breathe the air and center myself is also for God if my life is for God. So there's directly using an item for God, directly using an item in a service of God. Like you have an item of clothing, which potentially has wool and linen, and you get it checked for what we call shatnez. That's a direct service of God. And then you have the toothpaste and the laundry and the walks. And they also can be elevated. They're also part of God if that's what's going on in your life. And as we do these things, those items shift. So the toothpaste shifts, the laundry shifts. And we said, even more significant for us, we shift. We meaning our animal energy, our body energy. Because the animal of a Jew and the body of a Jew is also klipas noiga. It's also that level where there's a barrier, but there's a light shining through. So when I use it for God, just like the toothpaste, it also shifts to the side of godliness. Well, how do I use my animal soul for God? Good news, as we learned in chapter 35. Every time you're serving God, your animal soul is involved in the process. Because as we explained last week, and as we explained in chapter 35, your godly soul cannot directly instruct your body. Your godly soul seizes control of the powers of the animal soul, and through those powers utilizes the powers of the body to actually get the body to serve God. And therefore the powers of your animal soul and the powers of your body and your physical body, not your very essence animal soul, but the powers of your animal soul, the powers of your body and your physical body, all are shifted to the side of God for the duration of the commandment, which is amazing because that's what I'm in this world for. I'm in this world to give God me. And that's what I do every time I choose the right and I refrain from it. So continuing along this theme, v'gam b'mitzvos Talmud Torah. Now, not only in action, services, utilizing the physicality of this world, which is what we've been emphasizing since chapter 35, but also in other commandments that are more like cerebral or emotional or speech-oriented, like the study of Torah, like prayer, Kriya Shema, saying the Shema, which is a biblical commandment, the tefillah and prayer, in the essence of prayer, of course, which is the Shemona Esrei, which prayer is also a biblical commandment, the chiyotze behen, and such similar things that are not actions, things that are involving your mind, your emotions, your speech. Even though we don't view them as literally a physical action, which is really a klipas noiga activity. Nevertheless, our sages taught us, our sages said that we cannot say that thought can take the place of speech. We cannot say kaimalan, we've established. The hear her lav kadibur dami, that thought is not in the place of speech. Meaning, and therefore, when we pray and when we study, we have to move our lips. That is actually challenging for some of us, and that is actually challenging for a lot of us. One reason it's challenging is because maybe that's not how we were trained, or it's a lot faster if you don't, and it could be a combination of both. I never realized how complicated it was to speak until my 9-year-old dover came into my life and wanting to have my child speak. I suddenly realized and was educated how difficult speech is. It takes a lot of different muscles. It takes a lot of different skills. And a lot of us feel the difficulty of speech when we're trying to pray or we're trying to study, because we don't want to do it with our lips. We want to do it with our eyes and with our mind. But our sages said, I'm Milan, they've established, Dear Lav Kadibur Dami, that thought doesn't cut it. It's not enough. Of course, we have to have thought, and we need the component of thought. But just thinking study and just thinking prayers is not basically sufficient. There should be the movement of the lips, and ideally, and of course, especially in prayers where it's mandatory, your voice should be heard. So yes, I always knew that, and when I started going into speech therapy with my son, I learned that, of course, you can move your lips, but you also have to remember to turn on your voice. And of course, when we pray, most of us probably know to move our lips, and we have to remember to turn on our voice. And when we study, where it's even easier to forget, because most of us are not trained to move our lips, let alone turn on our voice. When we study, what the Alter Rebbe is saying, we want to make this as action-like as possible. We would like this non-action of study and this non-action of prayer be like an act. And as we make it speech-like, it's action. I'm not taking it from the legal component. Legally speaking, according to the letter of the law, if you don't move your lips when you pray, it didn't count. Besides for the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei, when your voice is supposed to be a whisper, audible only to your own ears, for the entire rest of prayers, your voice has to be audible enough that someone else can hear it. That is the law. But also it has tremendous spiritual import in what we're saying here, that we want it to be like an action. And for it to be like an action, it needs to be, at least for short, speech. In terms of studying, we're not going to say that you didn't study if your lips didn't move and your voice wasn't audible, but definitely, unless we're told you're in deep investment, you're like really thinking meditatively, contemplatively about an issue very deeply, so you're lost in your thoughts. But otherwise, when you study, yes, you're supposed to move your lips and your voice is supposed to be turned on. Your voice is supposed to be heard as you study. And again, as we're seeing here, the spiritual reason why this actually makes it an action that can change the world. Like every action we've been taught has a very special impact on the world. And actually, as we're saying, you did not fulfill your obligation until it comes out of your lips, not just with your eyes, not just with your mind, literally with your lips. The kaimalan, and it's been established, our sages say that the movement of the lips is considered an action. You might view it as a minor action, but it still comes into the category of action, which again has a legal import, and as we're seeing here, has a spiritual import, because then all the spirituality of action, to a certain degree, can be accessed through study and through prayer. Obviously, we're not changing objects in that same concept, but in terms of ourselves and using our animal energies and using our body energies, all of that now is happening. Why am I saying that it's like an action? It's not an action. Speech is an action. Thought is an action. Feeling is an action. Why are sages saying it's like an action? Because it's impossible for the godly soul to express itself through the lips, through the mouth, through the tongue, through the teeth, that are all physical items. Except, exactly as we discussed with the action, by utilizing the power of the animal soul, again here called the nefesh hachiyunis, chiyuni, vital, because we're utilizing its vitality to impact the body. So by utilizing the vital animal soul, we now change the body. So you have involved all these body parts: speech, tongue, lips, larynx, palate, teeth. They're all now part of serving God. And the only way that happened is because my godly soul seized my animal's powers to transform my body, which therefore means, what did I now just give to God? Power of my animal soul, powers of my body, physical body. Exactly like when I was doing the action commandment. But if I didn't involve the speech, then all these body parts would not be given to God. And now we're coming to a practical application. Of course, the first practical application was move your lips. The second practical application was turn on your voice. And now we're coming to a third practical application. The more power you invest as you speak, the louder, the more animated, the more energy you put into your words, he invests more animal soul energy in these words, which means more animal soul energy is now given to God. More animal soul energy is paving the way to redemption. So just imagine, it's not hard to imagine. You go through this every day. You're praying. Oh my God. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to move my lips. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to turn on my voice. Okay, so you schlep your way through your prayers, a little sleepy, a little spacey, and your voice is sort of trailing in and out. The Rebbe says, well, that's one way to do it. But we want to give a lot to God. You're praying anyway. Give him your tongue, your lips, your larynx, your palate. And if you don't do those things, it doesn't count anyway. So of course you got to do them. Oh, and turn on your voice because it doesn't count if you don't. Okay. But now the Rebbe says, let's upgrade. Let's do it with a lot of energy. Let's do it with a lot of power. Let's do it with a lot of calories, as we would say, physical energy. Because the more physical energy invested, that means the more animal soul energy invested. And we want you to invest a lot of animal soul because we would like your animal soul to be given to God. And this is how. And again, if you do it sleepy and spacey and dreamy and half in, half out, you're still giving some to God. But the Alter Rebbe says, give him a lot. This is what it takes. Give him a lot. Say your blessings with energy. Say it loudly. Say your amen loudly. Say your amen with energy. Say your prayers with energy. When you study out loud. Some people say it distracts them. I actually find it clarifies to me when I say it out loud. But if it does or doesn't, this is what God wants. He wants your animal soul, and he wants a lot of your animal soul. So say it loudly. And now we have a verse backing up this concept. And this is what the verse says. All my bones will say. It's a very famous verse. Probably most of you know it. But we're focusing just on these words. All my bones. My whole body is going to be invested. It's going to be a whole body experience. My prayers and my study and my blessings. And the blessing I say when I have used the restroom. And the amen I say. All of these times I turn and talk to God, I want to put all my energy into it. And the Rebbe goes on to say an amazing thing that will happen if you put all your energy into it. And this is what our sages said. If what you're doing is inlaid in all the limbs of your body, all 248, mishtameres, it'll be guarded. You'll have it. It's yours. Ve'im lav, but if it's not invested in your entire body, eina mishtameres, it's not going to be guarded. You'll forget. So the Rebbe here, to support his concept with actually a piece of Talmudic thought, is saying that our sages teach us that if we want to retain our study, we need it to be a whole body experience. We need our entire self invested for us to remember. And if our entire self isn't invested, we might not, probably not, perhaps won't remember what we studied. Now, of course, that's very logical on the normative life perspective. Well, yeah, the more I'm invested in something, the more I'm remembering it. And if I have my whole body involved, I've got a lot of different hooks for that memory that's embedded in my subconscious and a lot of different ways of pulling it out. But that's true too. But the Rebbe says it's also a spiritual truth, as the Rebbe now explains. Ki hashichacha, because forgetting, why do we forget our Torah study? He make klipas haguf v'nefesh hachiyunis habahamish. He make klipas noiga. It's because of that klipas noiga energy we've been discussing, which is the natural state of the body and the animal soul. But sometimes we can take that klipas noiga energy, and as we discussed at length last week in our reviewing now, we can elevate it. It could ascend to godliness when we're using it for God. V'hainu, meaning to say, when you weaken the evil power, umachnes kol koichan b'kedusha, hatayro atfila, and you invest all the power in your study or in your prayer, meaning the natural state of our body, the natural state of our animal soul, obviously, is klipas noiga. There's a barrier, but we can access the light. And if we access the light, as we explained last week at length, what we're doing is really detaching the light from that barrier. We're strengthening the light. We're extracting it, elevating it. It ascends to godliness, and the barriers fall apart because they have nothing that's feeding them anymore, because the only source of life is godliness. And the godliness ascended to Kedusha, to God's direct channel. So the klipa, the barrier, ceased to exist. So with our body and with our animal soul, it's not like the toothpaste I used or the coin that I put in the charity box. It goes and back and forth. It fluctuates based on what I'm doing with my body and my animal soul. But those moments where they're in godliness are eternal, as every moment of time is eternal. So at this moment, studying, guess what? We are studying. So this is a very real example. We're doing it right now. So as we study, if you're really investing your whole self in concentrating and focusing, I know it's a little hard on Zoom, especially if your camera's shut down, but if you're investing your whole self, that means all the power of thought of your godly is using all the power of thought of your animal, is using all the power of thought of your physical brain, is using the power of thought of your literal brain cells. And they're all in godliness. So the Rebbe says, guess what? Then there's no klipas, noiga, energy of forgetfulness that's going to erode that learning. But if as you're learning with a bit of your brain, but a bit of your brain is not invested, like happens all the time, of course. When that's the case, well, then part of the power of thought of your animal soul and power of thought of your human body are invested in godliness, but part are still in klipas noiga land. And in that klipas noiga space, that's where forgetfulness. And the Rebbe says that's why the sages are saying, if you want to remember, invest yourself completely. Because if you're completely invested, there's nothing energizing forgetfulness. So you'll remember. But if you're not completely invested, a bit of that energy is in klipas noiga, which is in forgetfulness, and then maybe you will forget. Now, of course, you could say, well, what does that have to do with prayer? I know it's not like a memory issue. Of course, it might be to remember the prayers, but assuming that's not the case, it's still bring out the same point. When you pray with intention, with focus, loudly, you're using all your animal soul energy, using all your physical body energy. So there's nothing left to feed that klipa, the klipas noiga. It can't gnaw away at your prayers and make them less heard by God, make them less effective, trim their wing. It's all invested in godliness because your physical self is invested, which means your animal self is invested, which means your godly self has taken over, and it's all going to the side of God for the duration of prayers. But if it's, my voice is on, but it's a little weak and I'm a little spacey and I do have other things going on in my mind and my voice is a little weak because I'm, whatever, a little tired and sleeping through my prayers, schlepping through my prayers, well, then there's a lot of animal soul energy and body energy that's not going into godliness. And that other part's in klipas noiga. And that klipas noiga can erode the quality of your prayers. And that's why we're saying, as we pray, as we study, and as we do anything else that we can make a physical service, even though it's not a physical action per se, like I said, making a blessing before an action, after an action, saying amen, that of course we all have heard so many miracle stories of the power of amen. All of these things, do it completely. So there's no klipa of your animal soul and of your body to erode the beautiful gift you're giving right now to God. Any questions on this? Any practical applications, how you see you can do this and you can do this better? Estherina?
Can your enthusiasm carry us?
You're not observing me as I pray in the morning, a little bit tired. You're observing me now.
Yeah, well,
I hope it will carry me.
It's the learning. You learn with a lot of enthusiasm. I'm just wondering if we could get credit for some of your enthusiasm.
Nope, you cannot. You cannot. You got to invest your own enthusiasm. Absolutely. And for some of you, no, seriously, to make it a whole experience, maybe you could write down a few notes, a few words or thoughts you'd like to remember. You might never look at the notes, but you're investing your body in it. You're forcing your mind to actually think of something that you should capture. It's a little hard when it's a passive experience. It's actually a lot hard when it's a passive experience. So you yourself want to try to make even a class where someone else can be very enthusiastic, but you're being passive, to really make it an active experience. I can freely give other people ideas of what to do, of course. It's a lot easier than doing something yourself. So imagine if you set yourself in the beginning of the class, I want to find something to share with my children. I want to find something to share with my husband. I want to find something to share with a friend, inspire a neighbor. And I'm going to be listening with that eye of, what can I share? That shift in your mind can move you from passive to active. because you're actively processing the information in a way of filtering it and thinking, yes, no, I can give this over. This is how I will give it over. So suddenly you're becoming an active participant, which means a lot more animal soul, a lot more physical body energy invested in this very active study. Anyone else? Any other how you can apply this practically? Share with us so we can do it as well. I mentioned before amen and blessings. The Rebbe here, of course, is talking specifically about prayer and Torah study, but it's the exact same concept. I know some people, they might find that easier. Like prayer might be a lot longer. They might be a lot more tired in the morning. And then the afternoon services, they might be a lot more rushed. So between being rushed in the afternoon and tired in the morning, it might be hard to really make it a whole body experience. But imagining deciding to do that on the blessings you make before you eat. Even just to think, well, I want to say them loud enough that if someone else is around, they really will have the opportunity to say amen. At least for my first coffee of the morning. I don't drink coffee. But for everybody else who has their first coffee of the morning, at least for that one, I want to focus. I want to think. I want to give it to God. After blessing, imagine telling yourself, again, I'm not saying I do any of this. I'm just freely giving it ideas. Imagine telling yourself, every time after I use the restroom, I want to stop and like appreciate that I can have a healthy body and it all functions. And I want to give God that blessing with my whole being. Or as I said before, amen. Consciously saying, I want to say amen. I want to say it loud. I want to say it meaningfully. Now I'm only contingent on hearing other people's blessings. But when I do, it's one word I want to give to God.
Cyril?
Yes.
Cyril?
Yes.
Hi, I just want to say that, my father, thinking of my father tonight, it's his yahrzeit, and when he would sing the benching, it had such an indelible effect on me as a child. Just the singing, he said it with such feeling that it just penetrated me completely. And it's like singing, the neshama, the singing is so effective in the davening.
That's such a beautiful idea. And yes, it is my grandfather's yahrzeit tonight. Avram Tzvi Hirsch, Ben Rivka Leah.
No, Ben Aram.
Ben Aram. Levi. That's a beautiful idea. That's beautiful. The idea of singing and investing your prayers with song. I know we have some people on that probably do that more naturally. And that's beautiful. That's a beautiful way to make it a whole experience. And of course, also, yes, influence others as well, but for yourself. And definitely in the Hasidic world, the idea of people naturally just singing, humming, bringing song into their prayers was very, very much done as just an expression of the souls connecting to God. And in moments, just different tunes burst forth.
Right.
That's a beautiful idea. And definitely it takes it from a dry experience to a whole body experience.
Right. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful. It's a great idea and very, very relevant. Thinking about them and think, what could you do practically? Because this is meant to be practical. And as the Alter Rebbe is saying, this is a road to redemption. So there's a lot of great vested interest, both personally, to give God as much of my animal soul and body powers as possible, and cosmically, I can bring redemption more when I pray with more energy. Yes, the Alter Rebbe is saying you do. So it really makes what you're doing have such heightened importance, and that's literally the point here. Someone just wrote me a chat about this. That's beautifully expressed. Someone wrote to me how she does exactly that when she uses the restroom, and before she says the blessing, she really thinks mindfully and intentionally that she's thanking God that her body worked. And when she's in that space, the prayer is a very whole body experience. It's really a gratitude to God, which is really what that prayer is. But we can sort of say it on rote and stop appreciating that we're really saying, God, thank you that my body works. Thank you that I have a healthy body and therefore can do all these functions without a problem. And unfortunately, of course, there are so many people that don't have that healthy body and that do suffer. Thank you, God, for giving me this blessing. So we stop and think that, and then we say the words. We're going to say the words with a lot more of our body strength. And that's what we're trying for. So thank you. That was someone, a direct message, just in case if she didn't want people to know who. I'm not mentioning her name, but thank you. That was someone in the class that already is doing that. So you see, we can do it. Continuing, if you're looking inside, you actually see, very unusual for the Tanya, it's actually now set off as like another section. Chapter 37 is a rather long chapter for Tanya, and we have quite a bit to go, pages and pages ahead of us, but all this is like the next section, meaning we really established here the basic conception, we understand the premise, we understand the road, we understand how we're going to do it. And now we're going to apply it. So this question that was asked is going back to, of course, what we've been saying since chapter 35, the idea, why are we saying this commandment is so special and therefore has so much power to draw God into the world? Originally, we learned in chapter 35, we were discussing draw God to us. And now we're not changing from that, but we're amplifying drawing God into the world. It's all because the commandment is embodying the will of God. So what does that mean? God created this world by looking into Torah. As our sages say, Istakal ba'araisa uvara alma. God looked into Torah and created the world. Torah is the blueprint of the world. What is Torah? Torah is God's will. This world is an expression of God's, but it's obviously removed. There's the blueprint, and then there's, the what's built from those blueprints. The commandment is why we have a world built by Torah. Every commandment is a very specific will of God that emerges from that blueprint, acted out in the fulfillment of that blueprint in this world as a very direct expression of why this is all happening in the first place. The commandment could be viewed as the tool to enable God's will to be clearly expressed. This whole world is the will of God. All of creation is the will of God. But the clear expression of his will is in the commandment. That specifically, with all of its nuances, very, very, very niche specific. That's what God wants. And on the backdrop of the world, which is, of course, what he wants, emerges precisely the reason for it all. That a Jew does this specific act, thinks this specific thought, says this specific words, now his will has expression, has flesh, is here in a physical reality. And that's why a commandment, we say specifically, is the will of God, meaning is the inner dimension of his will. Because everything in this world is God's will. If it wasn't God's will, it wouldn't be. But the specific inner will is, I want a Jew at this point of time, in this place, in this fashion, with this item, to do this. So when all those factors line up, when a Jew does a commandment, now the inner will is embodied. So it's as if during those moments, it's like decontextualized from you. It's the commandment being fulfilled. You light the candles to welcome the Sabbath, to bring in the Shabbos. So of course there's you as a person, purity, your table is set, you look all right, it's perfect, picture perfect candle lighting experience. And there's you lighting the candles. And that's definitely happening. And there's also at that moment, God's will for Shabbos candles being expressed. Meaning it's not even you, it's the act. There's a will of God that a Jewish person at this and this time, on this and this day, should light something to bring in the Sabbath. And that is right now what's happening. So there's you, as you view yourself as a person doing that. But there's also beyond you, bigger than you, God's will now being fulfilled. Which of course we don't usually sense when we're doing the commandments. We're within our own space. So we're not feeling this, as I'm calling it, decontextualized energy. But it's happening every time. There's me, and I'm thinking of all my needs, and I put money in the charity box and the pushka, and I need for this, and I need for this, and I need for this, and that's all true. And at the same time, God's will that a Jew should take money and give it to charity is happening. That's true every time a commandment is done. And that's why the commandment is so powerful. And that's why the commandment is bringing the infinity of God into our physical world. And that's redemption. Of course, there's many beautiful things that are happening because of redemption. But what is redemption? God in this world, uncovered, revealed, no barriers, as we learned at length in chapter 36. Well, what allows that to be? Commandment by commandment, we bring him into this world. And now that we understand what commandments are, we can understand why that's happening. Any other questions? Zois v'oiracheres. This, and now additionally, shekoyach nefesh hachiyunis, the power of the vital soul, hamislabeshes b'oisios hadibur v'talmud Torah tefillah, which is engarbed in the letters of speech of Torah study, of prayer, and similar things, like we were saying, blessings, mitzvos maisios, or in, as we were talking originally, action commandments. Harei gidulo v'chayuso mehadam. What gives energy to your physical body? This comes from your blood. That's where the life is coming. Shuhu miklipas naiga mamish, from literally klipas naiga, the physical body of a Jew. Klipas naiga, the animal soul of a Jew, which is entrenched in the blood. Klipas naiga. Shehein kol oichlin umashkin. What is feeding that blood? All the food you eat, all the drinks you've had. She'achal v'shasa, everything you ate and drank. V'nasu dam. And they became your blood, they became your energy, they became your life, your vitality. Shahayu tachas memshalta. That they originally started off as klibas naiga. This tomato, this carrot, this water, this soda, this cake, this chocolate. If it's healthy or not healthy, it's all klibas naiga. It's permissible. It's kosher. If it's not kosher, it's not klibas naiga. It's forbidden. It's klibas tomatoes. As we explained before, tied, bound, stuck, cannot be elevated. But no food or drink we're eating starts off as pure godliness. So what is it? It's klipas noiga. All of this food, which feeds into your body, your blood, your energy. So all of your body, your blood, your energy, it's all being sustained by klipas noiga. By that level, that's a husk, that's a shell, that's a barrier. But I can shift it. The ata. And now, because I'm putting my energy into God, into his study, into his prayers, into his blessing, into the actions of the commandments. All of that blood and all of the food and drink that's nurturing that blood is transformed from klipas noiga energy to God energy, straight revealed kedusha, God energy. It all becomes comprised in godliness because of the power of the animal soul, which is now being used to serve God. That is part of her, that grew from her. Because all that animal soul energy is invested in speaking God's words of prayer, is invested in speaking God's words of Torah, is invested in the action of this commandment. So all the animal soul, all of the body energy, all of the blood feeding that, all of the food feeding the blood, feeding those energies, are now all part of Kedusha, God energy, revealed. Asher hein hein pnimius ritzono yisbarach, meaning, what I mean by Kedusha, by godliness, just like I was explaining before, the inner will of God, Belisham Hester Panim, without any barriers. So what are we doing here? We're taking a massive step forward. Because remember, we want to give the whole world to God. So now we're broadening the scope of what is given to God every time we serve him. We might have originally thought what's given to God is my godly soul, which is. And now we discussed at length, and the power of your animal, and the power of your body, and your physical body, and any physical items that are engaged in this commandment. And now we're saying, and all of the food, whatever you ate, whatever you drank, whatever is nurturing your body, that's getting consumed through this action, it's all going to. So the Rebbe is like saying, let's step back and look at that food chain and understand that all of those items were klipas naka. It's permissible. It's not forbidden. It's not innately godly. It's not innately forbidden. That's klipas naka. Well, you ate that food. You had your breakfast, your lunch, your supper. You had whatever is now fueling you. And now you're serving God with those calories, with that food. So it's not only power of animal soul, power of body, physical body, items being used to do the commandment. It's the food that's fueling your body, as the Rebbe is saying, that's in your blood, that's vitalizing you. That is now Kedusha. It's now exactly like everything else that we're listing in the side of receiving its energy from pure godliness without any barriers. Why? Because your body couldn't function without it. So therefore, it's obviously part of the commandment. So therefore, it's part of the realm of straight, no barriers, godliness that we're calling Kedusha, holiness, godliness, God's side, which is very interesting thought and reflects back to what we were just saying before of put a lot of energy into your service. Well, if you put a lot of energy and you're, so to speak, burning those calories, that means those food items are being given to God. What do you mean given to God? I'm studying, I'm praying. What does that do with my lunch that I ate an hour ago? Because that's what's fueling your body. So look how we can extend the commandment, the service of God, to include a lot of aspects of our physical world. And that's what we're trying to do now, because we want to give the whole world to God. We want Mashiach now. And therefore, we're seeing that as more and more is affected by each commandment, more and more is going to God. More and more is now ready for redemption. Any thoughts on this? This is high motivation. You could say, okay, I guess I should eat a lot before I serve God. So I have a lot to give to him. But whatever you're eating, it's going to God. Yes. So we can, as someone just said, put lots of energy as we clean for Pesach, for Passover. Those people who are thinking about cleaning for Passover about a month before Purim. You have a lot of energy when you run around Tanya. Or you could just even think, like, sometimes things take a long time and there's a lot of things you have to do. And you'd be like, why can't this just be faster and simpler? And well, just think every step of the road, all that time, we didn't speak here about time, but all that time is going to God, and all your efforts are going to God, and all your calories are going to God. So if it was a frustrating experience and it took a long time, like you, I don't know, you were bringing a meal to someone and then you had to call 3 times to get the details of the food and the place and the address, and you had to go to the store because you didn't have an ingredient they needed, and oh my gosh, you just tried to do something nice. Why couldn't it have been faster and more, streamlined, efficient? Well, maybe God's saying, I wanted more to be elevated by this action. So sometimes annoying, sometimes like, why did it have to be longer road to do good? It's all just giving more to God. If you're trying to reach someone and you have to call 3 times to speak to them and to help them and to lift up their spirits, you're giving more to God. If you're having company over and for these people, you have to make a different type of food and you have to shop for different food and you have to clean your house more for these people, you're giving more to God. It's a very nice way to shift how we think about these things. So instead of being annoyed, instead of wondering, why is it taking so long and why is it costing me so much effort, it could be like, oh, God wanted more. So he made the road a little more circuitous so I could give him more. He needed more now, and that's why he wants me to give him more. Another wonderful practical application that a person could think is thinking about what they do and how can they, again, make it more. If I really understand God's point and purpose, if I really understand that the more energy I invest, it's more helpful for God, and of course for me, but also for God, maybe I could think, how can I ramp up the energy in what I'm doing? How can I make it something that utilizes more of this physical world, that embraces more and therefore gives God more. So we're here discussing this idea that everything is now going to the side of holiness, which means the inner dimension of God's will without any veils, as by the redemption, God will be completely revealed without any veils. And their vitality is now also comprised in this infinite light of God, meaning God's infinite light is what's expressed in his will. So if I'm saying, again, remembering what that idea of like decontextualized, it's not just me, it's the commandment is being done. The commandment is being done means my godly soul, the power of my animal soul, the power of my body, my physical body, the objects, the foods I ate, all of them are part of the mitzvah being done, which means they're part of the inner will of God, which means they're part of the infinity of God's light. It's all part of God's limitless, no barriers, no constrictions light, because they're all part of the commandment. And that is what the commandment is. Remember, going back to what we said in chapter 35, why specifically the action commandment has a special power that it could have, as we called it, Hashra'as Hashchina, the revelation of God's infinity. Because we said there's no self. It is a commandment being done. And only when there's no self can God be revealed. And now we're understanding that that is really what's happening, commandment by commandment. God's will is being revealed. And therefore, it's part of the infinity of his presence. Shehu Ritzonu Yisbarach, that this is what we mean by the will of God. So through this vitality, through the physical body, through the foods we ate, all being consumed and given over to God, then of course it's also, as we're saying, the power of our animal soul. And through this, we're impacting cosmically the entirety of Klipas Naiga, the whole world's energy of Klipas Naiga. Shehi Klos HaChayesh Lamhaza Hagashmi Bachumri, which is the energy of this physical world, as we said. This physical world, of course, is not primarily straight godliness, almost nothing is. And this world is not primarily forbidden. The majority of this world is not forbidden. The general energy of this world are items that are not holy and not forbidden. They're Klipas Noiga. And that's actually, to get a little more deep in Kabbalistic and understanding this, that's actually the filter. The energy of Klipas Noiga is like the filter that everything that enters this world has to go through. So all of the energy of this world is through Klipas Noiga. We want to change the world. We want to bring redemption. This chapter is about bringing redemption. You think it's about you and ramping up your commandments and adding more energy and not forgetting when you study and burning more calories. All that's true, but you are affecting the whole world. You're bringing redemption. And therefore, the Rebbe is now bringing it back to the global picture. So it's going from the very personal picture, each one of us individually doing this. Remember, we're affecting the globe. We're affecting the entire energy of Klipas Noiga, which is this physical world's general energy. As we explained last week, the Alter Rebbe is looking at it like target is Klipas Noiga. We want to bring redemption. We're targeting Klipas Noiga. Because if I can shift Klipas Noiga to godliness, well, there's no more Klipas Noiga. It's all godliness. And then there's no more evil, Klipas Tmeos, because that evil was feeding off Klipas Noiga to be sustained. The only food, the only energy, the only power is God. So evil has to feed off God energy to be. So if there's no more Klipas Noiga, there's nothing that evil can latch onto. It can't latch onto direct Kedusha, it can't latch onto direct godliness, but it latched onto Klipas Noiga, and through Klipas Noiga got fed. Well, if there's no more Klipas Noiga to feed it, it ceases to exist. It has no life support. So the Alter is saying, target Klipas Noiga, shift Klipas Noiga to godliness. Therefore, all Klipas Noiga becomes godliness. We took care of that realm, and all evil ceases to exist. So we took care of that realm. So what's left? Godliness, a world of redemption. So we need to understand that our personal service is shifting the power in the whole world. It's our personal service. It's affecting my godly soul, the power of my animal soul, the power of my body, my physical body, the calories I'm burning, the food I ate, the objects I'm using. It's all very, very me, personalized, shifting me to God. But it's changing the power of Klipas Noiga in the world. Each time we do this, the Rebbe is saying, it's not just the little pieces of me. I'm actually affecting the cosmic Klipas Noiga, and I'm shifting it to godliness. And then I'm shifting it to godliness. And I'm shifting it to godliness. Because ultimately, we want to shift the whole world. So therefore, it's very important to understand that even though this is sort of, I'm the mover and shaker in my world and I see what I'm doing, but what I don't see is, like, imagine all the strings attached, all the big pieces shifting from my little actions down below. And that's what's happening as well. So the Rebbe is now going to paint the broad, meaning to understand the Rebbe's vision here, how you're doing this act. You're doing this act, and imagine the whole world is changing. Every time we do the commandment, every time we remove, we do not allow ourselves to do the transgression. And someone asked, I'm going to review it one more time to explain this concept. I probably said it too quickly. How is this going to bring redemption? How is evil going to disappear because I shifted Klipas Noiga? We now understand how we shift Klipas Noiga. We've been discussing it for this entire session, and we discussed it a lot last time as well. But how does that shift evil? So again, to understand that, it's based on the premise that the only power, the only fuel of the world is God. Nothing exists but God. Things seem to have a lot of power and they seem to be opposing God, but it's a facade, it's a mirage, it's an optical illusion, it's to test us, to enable us to freely choose God. It's all illusionary. The truth is there's no power but God. Nothing exists but God. All there is God. So if all there is God, that means when I serve him, I'm in a great space because I'm connected to the source of all power. And that's true. Every time we serve, we are like, the car getting all that gas straight because it's hooked into the tank of gas. You're pumping in that gas. When I'm serving God, I'm hooked in. All those powers are coming to me. It doesn't feel like that. Well, if it felt like that, where would be your free choice? But sometimes it does. And sometimes it doesn't. But if it does or it doesn't, that's what's happening. Every time you serve, the only source of energy is pumping right into you. I sometimes think, like, I don't know, like if you're stuck in an airport or something like that, and you're sitting there and you're just this little anonymous person, nobody knows who you are. You're not important. You're just sitting, waiting for your flight. And there's thousands of people milling around. But I'm the source of life. Because I'm right now a Jew saying Psalms, studying, making a blessing as I eat my kosher food. I'm the source of energy, which all this energy, all these thousands of people around, they're unaware, but this is the source of life. So if that's true, which it is, it's also true for evil. What feeds evil? Only godliness. Only godliness feeds me, only godliness feeds my pen, and only godliness feeds evil. How does that work exactly? Well, the powers of evil, again, the Kabbalistic term is the three forces of klipa, of shells, of barriers, of impurity. Klipos tameos, gimel klipos tameos, the three levels of absolute impure klipa, shells and barriers meaning blocking from the God energy within them. They do have innately a God energy, otherwise they wouldn't be. But like every living thing, they need to feed off of something to survive. So what's feeding them? Well, godliness. Well, how do they access godliness? They're like, so to speak, opposite God energy, anti-God energy, though they are of God. How do they access that? They access it by this level we've been discussing called Klipas Noiga. In other words, Klipas Noiga has revealed God energy. That's why we can shift it. Since it has revealed God energy, it's a source of fuel. It's a source of God energy. So impure cannot access God energy, what we call klipas tmeos, the absolute evils. They have a relationship to klipas noiga. Klipa. This is a shell barrier husk to God. This is a shell barrier husk to God. We're in the same camp. And they are in the same camp. The camp is called Kabbalistically Sitra Achra. That's Aramaic. And it means the other side. Anything of klipas tmeos is in the other side. And anything of klipas noiga is in the other side as well. My pen and speech that's gossip and an idol and stolen money and desecration of the Sabbath, they're all in the other side. They're all in the same camp. As I said when we first started discussing this, theologically, there's no neutral territory. There's no like plank where it's not exactly godly, but it's not exactly evil. It does not exist. There's God's side, Kabbalistically called Sitra Dikdusha, again, Aramaic, the side of godliness, and there's Sitra Achra, two sides, nothing in between. So the pen and the transgression are both the other side. Obviously, this is not as deeply as that, but they're still in the same camp. So as such, the forces of evil can feed off of the pens of the world, the klipas noiga energy, which is still in their camp, but has revealed God energy in it, and through this fashion, sustain them. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, our strategy is emptying out that klipas noiga closet, shrinking that klipas noiga pool of energy. Because every time we take it and we move it to godly, it shrunk. There's less klipas noiga energy because now it's kedusha energy. There's less of this energy, which is on the other side, but I could shift it, and I shifted it. So it's no longer on the other side. It's godly energy. I shrunk klipas noiga. There's less to feed evil. And then I did something else with another physical object, with my power of animal soul, with my power of body. Notice in this whole chapter, we're not talking about the power of our soul, because that's already on the side of godliness. That's not helping me more bring the redemption. But when I move my animal soul, when I move my body, that's helping me bring the redemption. So every time I shift my body and my animal soul again, I shrunk the klipas noiga corridor. Every time I move another physical object, I shrunk the klipas noiga closet. I keep shrinking it and shrinking it and shrinking it. And each time I shrink it, there's less to feed the evil. If you could think of it in terms of ourselves and our service, and again, this is a Kabbalistic, Hasidic, philosophical perspective on life that I'm sure many people have, but now you understand the theology behind it. Let's say you heard about another horrific terrorist attack, like let's say you did here, and you would be like, oh my gosh, how can I help stop that? Well, I know I can help stop that. I got to do more good and do less bad. Okay, and that's true, but why is that true? Because again, every time I do something godly, I'm channeling an energy and putting it in, we call it putting lights in vessels. I'm channeling this diffused energy, and instead of allowing it to feed the other side, I now put in a vessel of godliness. So that means there's less energy that can feed the other side. So that means there's less energy to enable a terrorist to ram into people as they leave shul Friday night. So I'm literally sitting in Chicago and I'm changing the power of the terrorists in Pakistan or anywhere. How can I change their power? Because the only power is godliness. And if the godliness is not in a vessel, if it's not in God's side, it free, loose, can be feeding the other side. But when I take that energy and I do something with it, and I do another commandment, I do more, I do with more energy, I do with more enthusiasm, I do different things, I do extra things. I'm taking that energy and I'm capturing it on God's side, which means by definition, there's less to fuel the other side. So there's less possibility for evil to have power, flourish, and harm. So again, theologically, you might have known that, but not have understood exactly why it works. This is why it works. So that's what we mean. That's the premise the Alter Rebbe is saying here, that as we shift Klipas Noiga to God's side, the evil just disappears. We don't have to directly interface with it. We're not. It ceases to exist because it doesn't have a fuel. It doesn't have an energy source, because its energy source got shifted to godliness. And once it's on the side of godliness, evil can't get it anymore. So evil ceases to exist. Any other questions? Sorry, that was all responding to a question. I appreciate the question. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, now a Gentile, they come from Klipas Noga, right?
No, they come from Klipas Timaeus.
I thought the soul of a Gentile comes from Klipas Noga.
No,
No?
no. I'm sorry. I totally was unaware of the time. It is really late. So you're all amazing, because I don't know what you're all on. But somebody should have like rung a bell in my face or something. I'm just going to answer Esther's question. It's a very good question. A
Because then-
regular non-Jew soul and body are from Klipas Timaeus. A Noachide is a non-Jew who and see now I have bringing noises all around me. A Noachide is a non-Jew who voluntarily chooses to serve God by keeping God's laws for non-Jews. A Noachide is Klipas Noiga. His energy of his animal soul is Klipas Noiga. A regular non-Jew who is not a Noachide, body and soul is Klipas Timaeus.
So then how is it that, does that mean that everybody who would convert, a non-Jew who would convert, would be a Noachide, whether they knew it or not?
No, a convert is a totally different story. A convert is a non-Jew who, after going through an Orthodox conversion, emerges from mikvah as a Jew, which means just like me, just as we've been discussing, body of Klipas Noiga, animal soul of Klipas Noiga, and a godly soul of Kedusha.
But if they started as Klipas Timaeus, we can't.
It's a new birth. It's a totally new birth. They're a new person. Their birthday is the day they emerge from that mikvah. They are newly born.
Oh,
If you
okay.
had a brother and a sister that both converted, in a sense, they're no longer related. They're like two new people emerging from that womb of the mikvah.
Wow. Amazing.
I'm really